Hi, welcome back to another episode of Legal Quilts. Today we're going to do the long promised binding. And there's going to be a lot of moving around between all the different parts because I'm going to do it right from cutting the fabric all the way to putting it on. So hopefully y'all can live with how the video works. Hopefully any camera issues will be worked out. This is also going to be a long one. So bear with me and we will get this hopefully worked out. Okay, so there's a lot of things to show you. Binding's not hard, but I just want to make sure I go through all the steps. What we're going to be doing is first, I've got to bind this, so I need to cut the binding for it. Okay, you can buy commercial binding, by the way, but it comes in 3-yard packs, and unless you're doing something like this, you're going to need multiple packs. You're going to be spending a lot of money on this. Plus, what I like about making your own binding, although I'm not doing it on this one, is you can take one of the fabrics from your pattern. Like I could have done this using this centerpiece here. I could have done that in the sea glass and bound it in that. So you can kind of pick out the colors and get what you really want by using fabrics that came from your project. And it's not really hard to do it, okay? How much do you need to cut per one? You can do the math, you can measure your sides, add in a little for the mitered corners and all that stuff. Or you can go to patchworkposse.com and they have cheat sheets on all kinds of things. But one of them is the yardage for the binding that will tell you the number of 2-inch, 2 1/4 inch, and 2 2/3 inches strips that you need based on how much you're cutting, okay? And it's really helpful. And you can also follow my trick of just add one more. For like lap quilts, I go, well, each side is more than a 42 inches, so I should cut 2 for each, so I cut 8. Usually and then if I'm really nervous, I'll cut 9. That really makes sure I have more than enough, okay? So what we're gonna do is first, I decided I wanted to use this pretty floral that I had floating around. It's not really a scrap because there's a lot left of it. Okay, now how wide do you cut your pieces? Thankfully Clover, which I use to make my binding, the clips that I use to make my binding, also has a cheat sheet, although this is the whip stitch one that I use. Clover has a smaller one that I couldn't read the writing. But it tells you which brand, which color of the Clover one, because you'll see in a minute that they're color coded, and it will tell you how wide of a strip to cut. And it's whether you use single fold or double fold. I only use single fold, and I do 2 inches for everything, just because I found working with the smaller ones, even for a small project like that, it was really hard for me to get it to go around the edges and flip it over. So I just use 2 inches for everything. Actually, the directions say 1 7/8, but they also say feel free to go up 1/8 of an inch. Trust me, the quilt police are not going to come to your door if you cut your bindings 2 inches instead of 1 7/8. Okay? Actually, I don't think the quilt police exist at all. I don't cut it bias. There's plenty of videos out there that do. Now first I'm just going to smooth this edge out because you can see it's got lots of fuzzies on it. So I'm just going to smooth that out and toss it in the bucket over there, the throwaway bucket. I have a little empty washed out yogurt container where I throw all my threads and little pieces that I cut off. Then using my handy dandy ruler, like I said before in the episode about must-haves quilting things, this is what I use mostly for cutting strips and pretty much anything that I don't use my pre-cut for. So you just put it on the 2-inch line, and for something like this, although these pieces are not quite 42, they're more than enough. I mean, I could probably get 2 out of each one, so I'm going to cut 3. So I'd like to have a little bit left over. Someday I'm going to sew all the little pieces together and just have a really wild one. And that's going to be a truly truly scrap quilts. I'm just going to cut 3 of them. There's another reason I'm cutting 3. And that's because when I show you how you put them together, I want to do it twice. Okay. So you just cut 3 of those. Just straight cut strips. Always close your blade. And so you've got these 3 strips, all right? And then you come over here to the sewing machine. Whoops. Issues already. Come over here to the sewing machine. Now you're going to want to sew these on the bias. And that's just because it makes a little cleaner of a seam, and also when you fold it over, you don't have the seam bulk at the same spot on both sides. And that comes really in handy later. So you just sew those right side together. You can draw your line down. Draw your line to get the 45-degree angle. I don't do that because, as I've said before, I can actually eyeball it. So you sew it down. Just do a straight line down there as I'm trying to line it up. There we go. Just sew a straight line down there. And then when you're done, and you do these one at a time. I'm sure there's probably a way to strip piece them, but I've never figured it out. I like to, as I'm going along, even if I'm cutting like 8 or 9 of these, I like to do each one at a time just so that it's done and you don't miss any as you're going through the whole length of it later. You only have to go down 1 length each time. So you just do that for all your pieces. That's why I want to do 3 here so that you can see me do it again. Again, just lay it on there, right sides together. And you, let me see here, your needle's nice and smooth, up and smooth, and your thread's out of the way. My thread's not out. There we go. I discovered doing these videos that when my pieces would get caught up there, it's because the thread wasn't pulled all the way up. So these videos have been good for my skills too. I hope they've been good for yours. So then you just sew it along again and cut it. So now you've got this long flat strip, and what you want is a folded strip. So you do that. You take this strip, and we're going to come over here to the ironing board that I've already got set up. It's not actually my ironing board. I just got the mat out because we're doing a small piece here. Okay? And these are the clover clips I've been talking about. Okay? I said that they're color-coded. This looks purple. It's the blue one. It's the blue one. Okay? They have different sizes. This is if you want to do really, really big stuff. That's the black. I've done this once. This is the red one, which is if you want to do smaller projects and don't mind working with the smaller pieces. And then this is if you're really doing really small stuff. This might be you want to make bias tape for an applique pattern, something Celtic knot, where you're not really working with larger pieces. You're not trying to get it around a back, a front, and batting. Okay? And as you can see, I keep my cheat sheets right in their high-tech holder called a sandwich bag. Now how you do this is you lay it wrong side up, and you see this flat edge here, you see this wide opening here, you put it in here. Now I read this trick somewhere that sometimes it's really hard to get it in there. Just fold up your piece into a triangle, fold up your end into a triangle, and then it fits in just fine. You're not trying to cram it in because it's a little wider than the opening. You're not trying to cram it in. So you get that in, and again, I'm left-handed. By the way, today is International Left-Handers Day, so please celebrate all the lefties in your life. So because I'm left-handed, it's going this way. Now you want to pull your thread, you pull the fabric all the way through. I just get a long needle. You can tell this one's been bent, which is the only reason I keep it is because I use it to pull it through until you see your end showing up. Now you've still got it folded there, but that's okay. Just open it up, okay? And you can pull this back and forth till you get it adjusted. And this is your little pull handle so that you don't get warm. And then you just iron. This is why I like having an iron that comes off the base, because you're not fighting the cord as you're trying to iron your binding. And you just do this, and if it flipped like that, you just move it forward again to where you left off and lay it out flat again, and you just keep doing this. And you just iron the creases in there. Don't do it too hard. You don't want to burn your fabric, but you want the creases to stay so it kind of stays folded over. Trust me, as you go along, it's going to unfold, okay? Not the end of the world, because if you've done it right, you've got the creases, and as you're working with it, it'll just fold back over. And you just do that down the whole length. That's kind of why I chose a small project. Believe me, when you're working on I just finished a full-size quilt, your binding takes a while. And here you can see, remember what I said about when you fold it over and you're working with it, and then you don't have, if you use the bias binding, then you don't have your seams at the same place. As you see, your seams are like this, so they go diagonally. So when you've done the bias binding, you've got the seam here and the seam here, so you don't have that bulk as you're going along. And you just do this. Just iron it along. Now this is, like I said, a fairly short piece, and I'm rushing it a little bit because you don't want to sit here and watch me iron. But like I said, you just really got to get that crease on there. And you just keep pulling it along. Okay, a little bit, pull it along until you're done. And then you've got it all done. Now, this is a small piece, so it doesn't really matter what you do with it when you're done. You can pull it up, you can scrunch it up. You don't have to keep track of a lot of bulk. What I do, though, if I'm doing pretty much lap size and above, actually I do it for baby quilts too, is I just got a dowel, kind of thick one. I think we did like 2-inch thick, and cut it into 6 pieces, and then I just roll it along, and you see that it's unflat, it's unfolded, but I can still see, so that when I'm working with it, I just fold that over and work. Okay? Now, we're done with the iron, so let me move this out of the way because I might be working on this again. All right? 1 second. Okay. So, before you start putting it on the binding, though, you want to do one thing. Okay? Before you start putting it on the project, there's one step. This really comes in handy for anything. You're working with long strips, whatever. Just get yourself a dowel. My husband had a guy at work cut it for him, and we varnished it so it wouldn't snag on the fabric. And it's great. I've got 6 of them out of one dowel, and it was really great. Now, the first thing you want to do, I've got everything shoved under here. There it is. I love my So Easy table. It lets me keep stuff out of the way. Before you get started, you want to take one end, the end you're going to start with, okay, and take your Brilliant Binding tool and lay it there open out the end, okay, and lay it on the corner there. Put it right on the corner there. Okay, you're going to open out one end, lay it on the corner there. Doesn't really matter your distances or anything, because what you want to do is then, just put it on the corner. It'll give you the 45 degree. You just cut that up there. And you want to start with a 45 degree. And I'll explain in a minute, and it involves this tool. So, you can do this on your sewing machine. I like to hand sew my binding, both front and back, for a couple reasons. One, I know if I do the front, I am never, ever going to get all 3 layers pulled up properly and done. Plus, I like to do it while I'm sitting and watching TV and relaxing in the evening. There is nothing more relaxing than you're thread going in and out, in and out. Okay? Just your needle going in and out. And oh, I know how that just sounded. Sorry, didn't mean it that way. All right? So, either way, whether you sew it or not, whether you sew it on your machine or not, and if you do sew it on your machine, remember all this bulk you're going through, so loosen your tension a little bit. I'm going to kind of show you without actually sewing because I didn't bring any of my needles over. Whoops. Okay. So you don't want to start right at the end. Start a little bit back and leave a tail. All right? See that little bit of a tail? Just leave that. It's a little harder on small projects to have enough of a tail. In fact, I want to move this down a little bit. Okay. So what you do is you start a little bit back and you just sew along here. Okay. Now when you get to a corner, you're going to stop about 1/4 of an inch short. Okay. Because you want those nice mitered corners. So, yeah, I got all this stuff set up. Oh, I do have my needle and thread. So, I dropped my scissors here. Okay, so at the end here, you get to about 1/4 of an inch from your edge, and you can mark it on the fabric. Don't mark it on your binding. Mark it on your fabric. That way, your fabric doesn't move. Your binding might slip back and forth. You might have to cut, whatever. So when you get to the end, see, I don't think I did this. You just knot it off, okay? Just knot it off. When you get to that 1/4 near the end, you knot off your thread, okay? Let's use that as a pincushion for right now. Snip it. Now you've got your thread. Now you're at your corner, okay? And this is what Miss Went of Brilliant Bindings, Went Quilting says is, it's called flip and flop. So you flip it so that your fabric is, so that your binding is straight up from that corner and from your project. Basically, you're making a backwards L. This might be the other way for right-handed people. I'm not sure. Okay, but you're flipping it up, okay? For the really math inclined, that's perpendicular to this side. Holding it down, you flop it back so that now your binding is running along the new edge. And I like to, just so it stays, clip it, and then you clip the rest of it as you're going around. Okay, you clip. And this is, I clip because it makes sure you've got all 3 layers, as I didn't get there, pulled up, all set, all ready to go. Okay, and you just clip along to the side. And I also, when I'm getting along, now you're probably using more if it's a bigger project, I put one at the 1/8 mark right there at the corner. It's or the 1/4 mark. That's a little bit more, and I'll move it, but at least I know I'm getting near the edge, okay? Then you take your thread again, which, let me put a knot in it. Oh, I shouldn't do that on video. Okay. Of course. Now that I know y'all are looking, I'm too nervous to tie a knot. Okay. All right, so you've got your knot tied. All right. I know, and none of these, well, I'll show you one where I actually coordinated. This is obviously from a scrap project. As you saw, my scrap vanish quilts. Okay, so it doesn't really matter. This is where I'm using up all my leftover binding. Because like I said, I'm nervous, so I have a lot left, so I always make more than I need. Well, then I got to do something with the leftovers. So this is what I'm doing. Okay, someday I might open them back out, sew them flat, and make a scrap quilt that way. But for right now, I've got a great use with this project of this scrap vanish quilts of binding, of using the binding on them. And you just, and remember, I'm individually binding each one, and then they're going to be sewn together, so I'm going to use up more binding that way. And then you just start at your corner again where you flipped and flopped, and you continue sewing all the way to the next corner. So remember, the key here is stop sewing, tie a knot, flip and flop, start sewing again. And when you finish all of that, I'm not going to sew this whole thing. You don't want to watch that. Okay? When you're all done, I've been having fun here. Thought I had one more. Oops. Okay. Well, I skipped a step. Okay. When you're all done and it goes all the way around, it's going to look like this. Okay, so you've got all your fabric here. Some people then iron this out and all that stuff. I don't. And then you just, and you can see this one was to coordinate. I actually use this binding to coordinate with this. It's not the same fabrics, but it's kind of an earthy, sandy one to go with this pot holder. When you're done, and you've done it all, and I didn't get one set up at this stage, and I thought I would. Okay, remember I said at the end that you were going to have your piece? There's a reason that you did this, that you had this cut at the 45-degree angle. When you get all the way around, you're going to come here, okay? And you're going to see that overlap, all right? And what you do is, this is where you got to draw a line. You draw a line right here with your piece, okay? I can do that really quick. You draw a line on using the 45-degree angle, and that already, this piece, the Brilliant Binding tool, already gives you your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you cut on that line and then right sides together. So if you've cut this right, you should have the point of your piece here goes opposite from the point of the piece here, okay? So you want the kind of flatter edge, point to flatter edge, okay? Brilliant Bindings, Went Quilting has a brilliant video that shows all of this, okay? So when you've gone all the way around, then you just sew them together. And like I said, the 1/4 inch seam allowance is already there. You just sew it together and you have a nice smooth piece that doesn't have all the bulk like I have here. Here I folded it over so you'd have a nice smooth edge, and it's doubled and there's all this bulk there, okay? But you've got it, you just flip it over and you can start anywhere. I never start here because I want to put that off. I don't want to start at the bulky part. You just flip it over and you sew that side, okay? So that side is, you sew it from that side so that you're sewing down that side. And when you get to the corners, you just, again, flip it over, all right? And you're still going to have to do a little bit of a right angle, but it kind of folds nicely for you because you already did with the flip and flop method, you already did that nice mitered corner. And it comes out really, really nice. So that's how you do binding. Go to Went Quilting, just search YouTube for Went Quilting for this Brilliant Binding thing and watch that video. It has changed how I do binding. It has made life so much easier when I'm trying to join the edges. The main thing to remember is leave yourself enough tail so when you're trying to fit it under the sewing machine to sew it, you're not really having a lot of problems, because remember, it's going to be attached to your project. So you want enough that you can move it out and still not have to maneuver a lot of the bulk, okay? But that's binding, and that's how you can make a binding that goes with anything and that will look nice on your projects, okay? That will match your project. Again, you can use the commercial stuff if you want. Nobody's telling you can't. But I have found making my own binding. My husband saw me once making it. I had the ironing board out, and I was just pulling it through, and he says, "What magic is this?" And I'm like, "I'm making binding." It can be really enjoyable to just make your binding. And again, it's really relaxing to just sit there and watch. And of course, it's easier when you're using clips instead of pins, because then you're not getting stabbed, okay? But that's it. Binding's not difficult. It's not some arcane knowledge. And it's very simple once you start doing it. I put off doing it for the longest time because it's like, how do you get this to match up when you do one side at a time? You don't try to sew both sides at once. And again, the hand sewing, because it goes easier for me than on the sewing machine to get all 3 layers in. If you're comfortable enough doing it on the sewing machine, you can do both sides on the sewing machine. Nobody's telling you you can't, but it's not something scary. It's really simple to do, whether you do it by hand or by the sewing machine. All right? So, we're back. So remember, this is the all the social media, where to find me, and my store. I swear this fall I will start getting things up in the fall. This summer has just flown by. There will be more stuff on the store in the fall, I promise. Also, there will be affiliate links at the bottom. In the comments of in the description of this episode. Again, let me leave that up so everybody can see it still. Buy from your local quilt store, but if you can't, buy it through my Amazon links. It helps me. I'd like to get a truly cordless iron sometimes, so I don't have to deal with the cord at all. Just a thought. But I'd like to continue to do this, so buy from my Amazon links, support me on Ko-fi, buy something from my store. All right, the special order stuff is up. So until next time, thanks.